So I just got back from what has to be the most twisted wedding I've ever attended. And yeah, I was part of the family getting married. My sister Jade got married last Saturday to this guy Brian, whose family apparently has money coming out of their ears. And my parents, Jeanette and Connor, decided to use the entire event as their personal roast session with me as the main target. I'm 29, I have my own business doing website development and app consulting. I own my condo outright, and I've been financially independent since I was 23. But none of that matters to them because I'm not a lawyer like Mitchell, my older brother, and I didn't marry into wealth like Jade just did. Here's the thing everyone needs to understand right from the start. I've been waiting for this moment for years. Not the humiliation part, that was honestly even worse than I expected, but the opportunity to finally make them all squirm. See, about 8 months ago, I was at this tech conference downtown, and I saw Jade having lunch with this guy from her office. Nothing weird about that, right? Except they were holding hands across the table. And when they thought nobody was watching, they kissed. Not a friendly peck. A full-on kiss that made it very clear they weren't just coworkers. I took photos. I documented the date and time. And then I followed Jade's social media more carefully and noticed she'd been tagging locations that didn't match up with what she told the family about her whereabouts. I found out his name was Connor. Yeah, same as my dad, which is honestly hilarious. And he worked in her marketing department. I spent months just watching, gathering information, seeing how deep this went. Instagram posts, WhatsApp status updates that she forgot I could still see because she never bothered to hide them from me since she probably figured I didn't matter enough to pay attention to. Every girl's night out that was actually meeting up with him. Every work emergency that meant staying late at the office. I watched my sister plan her perfect wedding to Brian while screwing around with someone else. And I kept my mouth shut because I knew exactly when I wanted to use this information. My parents have always treated me like I was defective. Mitchell became a corporate lawyer at 26, makes ridiculous money, married this woman Amanda, who's apparently some kind of finance genius. Jade went into marketing, landed at a prestigious firm, and snagged Brian, who works in investment banking and comes from old money. And then there's me. I taught myself coding, started freelancing, built up my own client base, and created a business that actually makes me happy and pays well. But because I'm not wearing a suit to an office every day or married to someone they can brag about at country club dinners, I'm the family embarrassment. The wedding was at this venue that probably cost more than most people's houses. Everything was white and gold and dripping with flowers that I'm pretty sure were flown in from somewhere exotic. Brian's family showed up looking like they stepped out of some old money catalog, all understated expensive watches and inherited jewelry. My family showed up ready to impress them, which apparently meant making absolutely sure nobody thought I was actually part of their gene pool. It started during the cocktail hour. I was standing near the bar minding my own business when my dad Connor walked up with Brian's parents. He introduced Mitchell and Amanda as his pride and joy, talked about Mitchell's cases and Amanda's promotions. Then he got to me, and I swear to God he actually said I was their biggest regret and a living reminder that not all kids work out. Just said it, out loud, to people he just met. Brian's mom looked uncomfortable, but my dad just laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. My mom Jeanette found me about 20 minutes later. She was with Brian's aunt and some other relatives, doing the whole family introduction thing. She pointed at Mitchell and Jade and went on about how blessed they were to have such accomplished children. Then she looked at me and told them, "We don't claim this one. He's just here because we had to invite him." The relatives laughed nervously. I just smiled and sipped my drink because I'd been preparing for this kind of treatment for years. Every therapy session I never went to, every family dinner I survived, every holiday where I was the punchline. I remembered it all and used it to fuel what was coming. The reception was worse. They'd done a whole seating chart thing, right? Jade had obsessed over it for months according to her Instagram stories. I found my place card at this table in the back corner, basically hidden behind a plant. The card didn't just have my name. It said mistake #3. I'm the youngest of 3 kids, so yeah, real clever Jade. Mitchell's card said pride and joy #1. I pocketed my card. Evidence for later. Dinner was this 5-course situation that probably cost more per plate than I spend on groceries in a month. The waiter came around with wine, and when he got to me, he asked if I was the loser brother everyone had been laughing about in the kitchen. Apparently, the catering staff had been getting an earful from my family about what a disappointment I was. I told him, yeah, that's me, and asked for a double pour since I was going to need it. Then came the toasts. Mitchell stood up with his champagne and started this whole speech about family and bonds and the importance of surrounding yourself with real family members, not the parasites who share your blood. He pointed at me when he said parasites. The whole room looked I raised my glass and smiled bigger. Brian's family looked mortified. My parents looked pleased. Jade looked triumphant. I sat through the whole thing, smiled through every jab, every insult, every pointed comment, ate my expensive food and drank my wine and waited. Because here's what they didn't know. I've spent the last 8 months not just gathering evidence about Jade's affair, but also setting up my own leverage. See, 3 years ago, my parents asked me to co-sign on a loan for their house renovation. They were having some credit issues and needed my income to qualify. I did it because I was still trying to win their approval back then. That loan? I've been making the payments for the last 18 months because they defaulted and never told me. The house they love so much? The one they use to impress people? I could foreclose on it tomorrow if I wanted to. When they cut the cake, everyone gathered around with their phones out for photos. Jade and Brian did the whole feeding each other thing while everyone clapped. And then I walked up, gave Jade a hug like we were close, and whispered right in her ear that I hoped her marriage lasted longer than her secrets. I felt her go stiff. Her face went completely white. She tried to pull back, but I held on for just a second longer and told her we should catch up soon. Lots to talk about. Brian asked if she was okay because she looked like she was going to pass out. She said she felt dizzy from all the excitement. I went back to my table in the corner and watched her fake smile her way through the rest of the night while sneaking glances at me every few minutes. That was 6 days ago. My phone has been blowing up. Jade's been calling and texting nonstop. Mom's been leaving voicemails about family loyalty and forgiveness. Dad sent me this long message about how I better not ruin Jade's happiness. Mitchell called me yesterday demanding to know what I said to her. I haven't answered any of them. Haven't even read most of the messages past the first line. Just watching the numbers climb while I sit here planning my next move. Because they're about to learn that the family disappointment they've been crapping on for years isn't just going to take it anymore. I've got proof of Jade's affair. I've got financial leverage over my parents. And I've got zero interest in protecting any of them from the consequences of their own actions. They wanted to make my sister's wedding memorable. Well, they succeeded. Just not in the way they planned. Update 1. Okay, so first off, thanks for all the comments on my last post. To the person who said I should just let it go and move on, did you even read what I wrote? These people spent an entire wedding publicly humiliating me. I'm not letting anything go. And to everyone asking what Jade's secret is, buckle up because it gets so much messier than you think. It's been 9 days since the wedding and my phone has logged 94 missed calls. I'm not exaggerating, I counted. Jade alone has called 47 times. My mom's left 23 voicemails that I haven't listened to past the first 5 seconds. Dad sent me 31 text messages, and Mitchell's been trying to coordinate some kind of family intervention through WhatsApp messages that I've read but not responded to. They're all panicking, and I'm just sitting here watching it happen like it's the best show I've ever seen. The day after my last post, Jade showed up at my condo. I live in this building downtown with controlled access, but she must have tailgated someone through the front door because suddenly she was knocking on my door at 8 a.m. on a Thursday. I was working from home, had a client call scheduled for 9, and was not in the mood for her drama. But I answered because I wanted to see what her play was going to be. She looked terrible. Still had her honeymoon tan from their trip to the Bahamas that she'd been posting about on Instagram. But her eyes were red and she clearly hadn't been sleeping well. She asked if we could talk and I told her sure. But I had a call in 45 minutes, so she better make it quick. The way she flinched at that told me she'd expected me to drop everything for her, like I used to do back when I was still trying to be part of this family. We sat in my living room, and she started with this whole speech about how she knew we'd had our differences over the years, but family was supposed to stick together. I just stared at her. She kept going, talking about how mom and dad were just old-fashioned and didn't understand my career choices, how Mitchell was stressed from work and didn't mean the things he said. The whole time she's doing this thing where she's trying to cry without actually crying, like she's going for sympathy but doesn't want to ruin her makeup. Finally, I asked her why she was really there. She stopped the fake tears and told me she needed to know what I meant at the wedding. What secrets was I talking about? I smiled and asked her if she really wanted to have this conversation or if she wanted to keep pretending everything was fine. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. She didn't have any secrets, and I was clearly trying to cause problems in her marriage. So I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos from 8 months ago. Her and Connor at that restaurant downtown, holding hands, kissing. The color drained from her face. She tried to grab my phone, but I pulled it back and told her those were already backed up in 3 different places, so destroying my phone wouldn't accomplish anything. She started talking fast, telling me it wasn't what it looked like. It was just a mistake. It only happened a few times. It was over now. I asked her how many times a few was. She said it didn't matter because it was finished and she loved Brian, and I needed to delete those photos right now. I told her I'd think about it. She switched tactics completely and started yelling about how I was being vindictive and cruel, how I'd always been jealous of her success, how this was just like me to try to ruin her happiness because I couldn't stand seeing her win at life. That's when I told her about the house loan that mom and dad had defaulted on, the one I'd been covering for 18 months while they used me as their personal ATM. Her face went white again. She asked how I could even think about doing something to mom and dad's house. I told her I wasn't thinking about it. I was actively planning it. And if she didn't want to watch our parents lose everything they'd spent years building, she might want to reconsider how she talked to me. She left after that, slammed my door hard enough that my neighbor stuck his head out to see what was happening. But here's the thing. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't try to actually apologize for anything. She just got mad that I had leverage over her. That's who Jade really is underneath all the designer clothes and perfect Instagram posts. She's only nice when it benefits her. That same afternoon, Mom called from Dad's phone. I answered because I wanted to see if they knew about Jade's visit yet. Mom immediately started in about how I needed to stop whatever game I was playing, how I was tearing this family apart, how disappointed she was in me. I asked her if she remembered co-signing the loan papers 3 years ago. She went quiet. I asked if she'd noticed the payments being made every month, even though they stopped contributing. More silence. Then Dad grabbed the phone and told me that house was their retirement plan, their security, and I had no right to threaten it. I reminded him that legally, since I'd been making the payments, I had every right. He said I was being manipulated by my own bitterness and resentment. I told him he was absolutely right and asked if he wanted to discuss the 18 months of payments I'd made that they never acknowledged or thanked me for. He hung up. Mitchell called me that evening from his office. I could hear other people in the background, so he must have been working late. He started with this lawyer voice, all calm and professional, telling me we needed to have a family meeting to discuss some issues that had come up. I asked him which issues specifically, Jade's affair or mom and dad's loan default. He told me not to be dramatic, that families had complications and we needed to work through this like adults. I asked him if calling me a parasite at his sister's wedding was working through things like adults. He said that was just a toast. People say things at weddings for laughs. I was being too sensitive. I told him I had the whole thing recorded on my phone from 3 different angles because other people had posted videos on Instagram. He switched tactics and asked what I wanted. Money? An apology? What would it take for me to stop causing problems? That's when I realized they still didn't get it. They thought this was negotiable. They thought they could throw money at me or say sorry and I'd just fold like I always used to. So I told Mitchell I wanted exactly what they'd given me at that wedding. Nothing. I wanted them to feel as worthless and unwanted as they'd made me feel for years. Then I hung up. The really interesting part started yesterday. Brian's mom, Amanda, reached out to me through Facebook Messenger. We'd never talked before. She'd barely acknowledged me at the wedding. But suddenly she wanted to have coffee and chat about family dynamics. I was curious enough to say yes, so we met at this bagel place near her office yesterday morning. She ordered some fancy latte and a whole wheat bagel while I got regular coffee and a plain bagel. And we sat in this corner booth while she tried to subtly interrogate me about Jade. She started by saying she'd noticed some tension at the wedding and wanted to make sure everything was okay with her new daughter-in-law's family. I told her everything was fine, just typical sibling stuff. She didn't buy it. Then she asked if there was anything about Jade I thought Brian should know before they really started their life together. I realized Jade must have been acting weird enough at home that Brian's family was getting suspicious. I told Amanda that Jade was a grown woman making her own choices, and if Brian had questions, he should ask his wife directly. Amanda said she was just concerned because Brian had been hurt before by someone who wasn't honest with him, and she didn't want to see her son go through that again. I almost felt bad for Brian in that moment. Here he is, married this woman who's been cheating on him, and his mom can already tell something's off. But I didn't say anything about the affair because that's not my revenge to take. That information is leverage for when I need it, and I'm not wasting it on Brian's mom during a casual breakfast. Amanda tried a few more angles, asking about my business, my relationship with my parents, whether Jade had always been this anxious. I gave her nothing useful. We finished our bagels and went our separate ways, but I could tell she was going to keep digging. That's a complication I didn't fully plan for. Brian's family actually paying attention and asking questions. Last night, my parents showed up at my building. The front desk called up and asked if I wanted to allow Connor and Jeanette access. I said no. They called back 10 minutes later saying my parents were refusing to leave the lobby until I talked to them. I went downstairs in my sweats and old t-shirt, looking exactly like the disappointment they always said I was, and found them sitting on the lobby couch like they owned the place. Dad started immediately with how I was being unreasonable and childish. Mom tried the emotional approach, talking about how she'd given birth to me and raised me. And this was how I repaid her. I stood there and let them rant for a solid 5 minutes, while the front desk guy pretended not to listen. Then I asked them a simple question. Did they plan to start making their loan payments again, or should I proceed with foreclosure? The look on their faces was worth every second of the last 9 days. They genuinely thought I was bluffing. Mom started crying for real this time, not the manipulative tears, but actual distress. Dad said I wouldn't dare, that I'd destroy my own family. I told him they'd already done that themselves years ago when they decided I wasn't worth their respect. Mom asked what I wanted them to do, and I told her I'd let them know when I figured it out. Then I went back upstairs and left them in the lobby. This morning I got a text from Mitchell saying he'd consulted with a colleague about the loan situation, and I should prepare for legal action if I actually tried to foreclose. I texted back asking if his colleague knew his clients had defaulted, and their son had been covering the payments without their knowledge. He didn't respond. I've also been checking Jade's Instagram, and she's deleted every post from the wedding except the professional photos that don't show any family members except her and Brian. All the candid shots with my parents, the reception photos, the ones where you could see me in the background, gone. She's trying to erase the evidence of what happened. Too bad about those 47 videos other people posted that I've already downloaded and saved. Brian posted a photo of them at some charity thing last night, and Jade looks miserable in it. The caption is all about how blessed he is to have found his soulmate and partner in life. The comments are full of congratulations and heart emojis. Nobody knows she's falling apart behind the scenes. So here's where we are. Jade's panicking about the affair evidence. My parents are panicking about the house. Mitchell's trying to threaten me with lawyers, and Brian's family is starting to ask questions. And me? I'm just getting started. Because they still think this is about the wedding. They still think I'm mad about some insults and mean toasts. They have no idea this has been building for years, and I've been planning this since the day I realized they were never going to see me as anything but their biggest failure. The revenge isn't going to be quick, and it isn't going to be simple. It's going to be surgical and devastating. And when I'm done, they'll understand exactly what it costs to treat someone like garbage for their entire life. Update 2. All right. For everyone asking why my family treats me like this in the first place, I need to give you the backstory because it actually matters for what's happening now. When I was 19, I dropped out of college after my first year. Not because I was failing or partying too hard, but because I'd already started making decent money doing freelance web development, and I saw an opportunity to build something real instead of sitting through 4 more years of lectures about things I was teaching myself faster online. My parents lost their minds. Dad told everyone at their golf club that I'd quit school. Mom cried to her friends about how embarrassing it was that her youngest couldn't handle university. Mitchell had just graduated law school and was already working at a firm, and Jade was thriving in her marketing degree. Meanwhile, I was the dropout who worked from home in sweatpants and didn't have a real job according to them. The fact that I was making more than most college graduates by the time I was 22 didn't matter. I wasn't respectable. I didn't fit their image of success. They spent years trying to get me to go back to school. Dad would bring up community college at every holiday dinner. Mom would send me links to online degree programs. Mitchell told me I was wasting my potential. Jade said I was making the whole family look bad. When I bought my condo at 25 with cash I'd saved from my business, they told people I must have gotten lucky with crypto or something because they couldn't admit their dropout son had actually succeeded on his own terms. So yeah, the wedding wasn't the start of this. It was just the most public humiliation in a lifetime of them being ashamed of me. Now on to what's been happening the last 6 days, because it's escalating faster than I expected, and honestly, it's getting wild. Mitchell showed up at my office on Monday. I rent space in this co-working building downtown where I meet with clients and work when I need to get out of my condo. He walked in during my lunch break like he owned the place, sat down across from my desk, and laid out what he called a family settlement proposal. He had actual documents printed out. The guy brought paperwork to bribe me. The proposal was simple. I'd delete all evidence of Jade's affair, sign over my rights to pursue the loan foreclosure, and in exchange, the family would pay me $50,000 and agree to stop making negative comments about my career. I read through the whole thing while he sat there looking smug, like he'd just solved a complex legal problem. Then I asked him if he seriously thought I could be bought off for 50 grand. He said it was a generous offer, considering I had no real damages to claim, and the photos I took could potentially be considered invasion of privacy. I reminded him that Jade was in a public restaurant and had no reasonable expectation of privacy there. He said I was being difficult and petty. I told him his settlement proposal was insulting and he could leave my office. He said I'd regret not taking this deal when things got ugly. That's when I asked him if he remembered my 23rd birthday. He looked confused. I said 6 years ago, when I'd made my first really big client contract and wanted to celebrate, I'd invited the whole family to dinner at this nice restaurant downtown. Mitchell had shown up an hour late, spent the whole dinner on his phone with work stuff, and left before dessert without saying happy birthday. Dad hadn't come at all because he had a golf game. Mom came, but spent the whole time asking when I was going to get a real job. Jade came, but brought her boyfriend at the time, who spent the entire meal talking about his corporate position. Mitchell said that was years ago and had nothing to do with anything. I told him it had everything to do with everything. Every birthday they'd missed, every achievement they'd dismissed, every time they'd chosen their image over actually caring about me. I remembered all of it. The 50 grand didn't even cover the therapy I should have gotten to deal with their treatment. He left without another word. Tuesday afternoon, Jade called me from a blocked number. I answered because I was curious about the tactic change. She was crying real tears this time, not the fake stuff from her condo visit. She said Brian had been asking questions about why she'd been so distracted since the wedding, why she kept checking her phone obsessively, why she'd been having nightmares that woke her up at 3 a.m. I asked her what she'd told him. She said she blamed it on wedding stress and adjusting to married life, but Brian knew her too well and could tell something else was wrong. She begged me to please just delete the photos and let her move on with her life. I asked her why she'd done it in the first place. Why cheat on a guy who clearly loved her enough to marry her? She went quiet for a long time. Then she said Brian was safe and stable and exactly what she was supposed to want. But Connor from her office made her feel exciting and dangerous and alive. She said it had started as just flirting at work events and turned into meeting for lunch and then turned into more. She claimed it ended 3 months before the wedding and she'd broken it off to commit to Brian fully. I asked if Connor knew it was over. Another long silence. She said he'd been texting her since the wedding asking to meet up and talk. She'd been ignoring him, but he was persistent. I told her that sounded like a problem she created and needed to solve herself. She started yelling at me through the phone about how I was ruining her life over nothing, how the affair was in the past and didn't matter anymore, how I was being vindictive and cruel for no reason. I told her I had plenty of reasons and hung up. She called back immediately from her regular number and I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that was 3 minutes of her sobbing and saying I was destroying her marriage before it even really started. I saved the voicemail. Wednesday morning, I got a very interesting Instagram DM. Brian's mom, Amanda, wanted to know if I'd be willing to have another coffee chat, this time with Brian's dad joining us. I agreed to meet them Thursday morning at the same bagel place. The fact that they were escalating to both parents told me they were getting seriously concerned about something. But Wednesday afternoon is when things got really interesting. My parents showed up at my office this time. The front desk called to ask if I'd see them, and I said sure, send them up. They walked in looking older than I'd ever seen them look. Mom's hair wasn't perfectly styled like usual. Dad wasn't wearing one of his expensive polo shirts. They sat down and Dad started with how they'd been talking to their financial advisor about the loan situation. He said if I pursued foreclosure, it would destroy their credit completely, make it impossible for them to borrow money again, and potentially force them to sell the house for whatever they could get. Mom said they'd worked their whole lives for that house and I was threatening to take it away over some hurt feelings. I asked them if they'd worked their whole lives making loan payments or if I'd been the one doing that for the last year and a half. Dad said they'd had some temporary cash flow issues and had intended to catch up on the payments. I pulled up my bank records on my laptop and showed them every single payment I'd made. 18 months of mortgage payments at $2,400 each. $43,200 total. Mom actually gasped. I don't think they'd ever done the math. Dad said they'd pay me back when they could, but I needed to be patient and understanding. I asked them when in the last 10 years they'd been patient and understanding with me. Mom said that was different. They were trying to guide me toward a better life. I asked if publicly humiliating me at Jade's wedding was part of that guidance. Dad got angry then and said I was twisting everything around, that they'd made some jokes that I was taking too seriously, that families tease each other and I needed to grow thicker skin. I asked him if he'd like me to play the video from Mitchell's toast, where he called me a parasite and pointed at me. Dad said Mitchell was just being theatrical for the wedding audience. That's when I told them I'd already contacted a foreclosure attorney and started the preliminary paperwork. The color drained from both their faces. Mom asked how I could do this to my own parents. I said the same way they could spend years making me feel worthless. Apparently it runs in the family. Dad said I'd better be prepared for consequences if I went through with this. I told him I'd been preparing for years and walked them out of my office. Thursday morning, I met Brian's parents at the bagel place. His dad turned out to be this quiet guy who barely said anything while Amanda did most of the talking. She ordered her fancy latte again and got straight to the point. They'd noticed Jade seemed anxious and secretive. Brian had mentioned she'd been acting strange, and they wanted to know if there was something going on in her family that might be affecting her mental state. I ate my bagel and told them Jade's family was complicated, but that was true of most families. Amanda said she'd raised Brian to value honesty above everything else, and if there was something he should know about his wife, she hoped someone who cared about him would speak up. I realized she was trying to get me to tell her about the affair without directly asking. I asked her why she thought I'd care about Brian's happiness. We'd barely spoken before the wedding. She said she could tell from the wedding that I wasn't close with my family, but that didn't mean I wanted to see innocent people get hurt. Her husband finally spoke up and said they'd invested a lot in setting up Brian and Jade's life together, and they just wanted to make sure their son hadn't made a mistake. The way he said invested made me think money. I asked what kind of investment they meant. Amanda looked uncomfortable, but her husband said they'd helped with the down payment on Brian and Jade's new house. They'd paid for the wedding, and they were planning to bring Brian into some family business ventures. He said all of that was contingent on Brian being in a stable, honest marriage. I told him Jade's honesty was something they should discuss with her directly, finished my coffee, and left. But now I had new information. Brian's parents had serious money tied up in this marriage, and they were already suspicious. That changed the leverage situation entirely. Friday afternoon, Mitchell called me from a different number than his usual cell. I answered, and he sounded stressed. He said Jade had told him about her conversation with me where I'd brought up Connor. He said I was playing with people's lives and needed to stop before someone got seriously hurt. I asked him who he thought was going to get hurt, and he said, marriages end over infidelity. Brian's family had resources and would destroy Jade financially in a divorce, and I was basically setting up my own sister for ruin. I told him Jade had set herself up for ruin when she decided to cheat on her fiancé. Mitchell said people make mistakes and deserved second chances. I asked him if I'd gotten a second chance when I dropped out of college, or if the family had spent years punishing me for that choice. He said that was completely different. I said it really wasn't. They judged me for making an unconventional choice, and now I was judging Jade for making an immoral one. He tried arguing that my education decisions only affected me while Jade's affair affected Brian too. I pointed out that their treatment of me had affected my entire life and mental health, but they'd never cared about that. He hung up on me. Last night, Jade texted me from what looked like a new number. She said Connor had shown up at her office on Friday asking to talk, and she'd had to hide in the bathroom until he left. She said he'd been texting her all week saying they needed to discuss their situation, and she was terrified he was going to approach Brian directly. She asked if I had any photos of Connor because she was considering filing a harassment complaint. I realized Jade's affair was turning into a bigger mess than even she'd anticipated. Connor apparently wasn't accepting the breakup quietly. I told her I had photos of them together, but not of him alone, and filing a harassment complaint would require her to explain how she knew him well enough for him to be harassing her. She didn't respond after that. This morning, I woke up to an Instagram DM from someone I didn't know. The profile belonged to a woman named Sarah who worked at Jade's company. She said she'd heard through the office gossip that Connor had been involved with someone who'd recently gotten married, and was wondering if I knew anything about it since she'd seen me tagged in Jade's wedding photos before they were deleted. I didn't respond because I'm not about to get involved in office drama, but the fact that people at Jade's work are talking about it means the situation is spreading beyond my control. That's actually fine by me because I'm not the one who needs to contain it. Jade is. So here's where everything stands now. The foreclosure process is officially started. My parents are panicking. Mitchell is threatening vague consequences. Jade's affair is becoming office gossip. Her affair partner is apparently not going away quietly. Brian's parents are actively investigating their daughter-in-law, and I'm just watching all of it unfold like dominoes falling exactly the way I planned. The best part? None of them have actually apologized for the wedding yet. Not once has anyone said sorry for what they did. They're just mad that I'm not letting them get away with it anymore. Final update. Okay, so to everyone who said this would blow up in my face and I should have just walked away, you were right that it blew up, but you were wrong about whose face it hit. Buckle up, because the last 5 days have been absolutely insane, and I'm going to tell you everything. Monday started with my parents showing up at my condo building again at 7 a.m. The front desk called, and I told them I wasn't available. They apparently sat in the lobby for 2 hours before finally leaving. My phone showed 6 missed calls from Mom's number and 4 from Dad's by the time I checked at lunch. I didn't listen to any of the voicemails. That afternoon, I had a meeting with my foreclosure attorney. We went over all the documentation, the original loan papers with my signature, the payment history showing 18 months of me covering the full amount, the default notices that had been sent to my parents that they'd ignored. My attorney said I had an airtight case and asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed because foreclosing on family was going to get messy. I told him I'd never been more sure of anything. He filed the official foreclosure notice that day. My parents would receive it within 48 hours. I went home and worked on a client project like it was a normal Tuesday, because for me it kind of was. I'd been planning this for so long that actually executing it felt weirdly calm. Tuesday morning, Jade called me 17 times between 6 a.m. and noon. 17. I counted because my phone keeps track of this stuff. She left voicemails that got progressively more frantic. The first few were her trying to sound calm and reasonable, asking me to please call her back so we could talk about this situation like adults. By voicemail number 12, she was openly crying and begging me to just tell her what I wanted from her. I didn't want anything from her. That was the part she couldn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation, but I did text her back and told her that if she wanted to talk, she needed to come to my office at 4 p.m. She showed up at 3:45 looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her makeup was done, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. We sat in my office and she immediately started with how I was destroying her life. I asked her how I was doing that exactly. She said Brian had been asking more questions, his parents were asking more questions, people at her office were gossiping about her and Connor, and she was terrified everything was going to come out. I told her everything was already out. She just hadn't accepted it yet. She asked what that meant, and I showed her my phone. I'd been contacted by 3 more people from her office through Instagram over the last 2 days, all of them asking questions about the wedding, about Jade's relationship status, about whether I knew Connor. The office gossip had apparently reached critical mass and people were connecting dots. Jade went white and asked if I'd responded to any of them. I said no, I didn't need to. They were figuring it out on their own. She started crying again and said I needed to help her fix this, that we were family, and family helped each other. I asked her where that family loyalty was when she was laughing at Mitchell's parasite toast. She said that was just a wedding thing. She didn't actually think of me that way. I pulled out my phone and played a video from 2 Christmases ago that I'd found while going through my old photos. In the video, Jade is talking to Mom in the kitchen and doesn't know I'm recording from the living room. She's saying she wishes I'd just moved to another city so she wouldn't have to explain her weird dropout brother to her friends anymore. Mom agrees and says maybe I'll eventually get embarrassed enough to either go back to school or at least get a respectable job. They're both laughing about it. Jade watched the video and started saying that was taken out of context. She was just venting about something else I'd done. I asked what I'd done. She couldn't answer. I told her to leave my office and she did, but not before saying I was going to regret destroying this family. I told her the family was already destroyed. I was just making it obvious. Wednesday is when things got really interesting. Brian's mom, Amanda, called me and asked if we could meet that evening at a sports bar near their house. Not a coffee shop this time. A loud, crowded bar where we could talk without it looking like a formal meeting. I met her there at 7 p.m. and she was already 3 drinks in based on the empties on the table. She got straight to it. She said Brian had come to her yesterday and told her Jade had been acting increasingly paranoid and secretive. She'd caught Jade deleting text messages. Jade had changed her phone password to something Brian didn't know, and Jade had been receiving calls from a blocked number that she would leave the room to answer. Amanda said Brian was starting to wonder if Jade was having financial problems or if there was something else going on. I asked her why she was telling me this. She said because I clearly knew something and she was tired of playing games. She said Brian was her only son, and she'd spent too much money and time on this wedding to watch him end up in a bad marriage. She asked me directly if Jade was cheating on Brian. I told her I wasn't going to answer that question, but I would show her something. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos from 8 months ago. Jade and Connor at the restaurant, holding hands. Amanda stared at it for a long time. Then she asked if there were more photos. I said yes. She asked if I had proof it continued after they got engaged. I pulled up the Instagram post I'd saved where Jade had claimed to be at girls' nights on dates that matched up with Connor's Instagram stories from the same bars and restaurants. Amanda took out her own phone and started taking photos of my screen. I didn't stop her. She asked why I hadn't told Brian myself. I said because this wasn't about Brian. It was about Jade facing consequences for her choices. Amanda said Brian was going to be devastated, and I said maybe he should be. Better to be devastated now than 5 years and 2 kids into a marriage with a serial cheater. She finished her drink and told me Brian's dad was going to want to talk to me about the house situation since they'd co-signed on the mortgage with Brian and Jade. I said I was happy to talk to him. She left and I sat there finishing my beer while mentally calculating how long it would take for that information to reach Brian. Thursday morning, my parents received the official foreclosure notice. I know because Mitchell called me at 8:15 a.m. screaming about how I'd actually done it, how I'd really filed foreclosure papers on our parents' house. He said Mom was hysterical and Dad was on the phone with lawyers trying to stop it. I told him good luck with that and hung up. Mom called me 14 times that day. Dad called 11 times. Mitchell called 8 more times. I answered none of them. At 6 p.m., my doorbell camera showed all 3 of them standing outside my building. The front desk called, and I said I wasn't receiving visitors. They stayed there until almost 8 p.m., arguing with the security guard before finally leaving. My phone had 47 missed calls by the time I went to bed Thursday night, just from that one day. The voicemails ranged from Mom sobbing about how they'd be homeless to Dad threatening to sue me for everything I had to Mitchell trying to negotiate some kind of payment plan. I didn't listen to most of them past the first few seconds. Friday afternoon, everything came to a head in the most spectacular way possible. Brian's dad called me and asked to meet at their house to discuss what Amanda had showed him. I drove to their place in the suburbs, this massive house in a gated community that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. Brian was there too. We sat in their formal living room and Brian looked confused about why I was there. His dad said they'd asked me to come discuss some concerns about Jade. Brian said he didn't understand what concerns they could have that involved me. Amanda pulled out her phone and showed Brian the photos of Jade and Connor. Brian stared at the photos for a long time. Then he asked where they came from. I told him I took them 8 months ago when I saw his wife having lunch with her coworker. Brian asked why I hadn't told him before the wedding. I said because I didn't know him. We weren't friends. And frankly, what his fiancée did wasn't my business. Brian asked if I had more evidence. I showed him the Instagram timeline, the location inconsistencies, the deleted posts from the wedding. His mom showed him the information she'd gathered about Connor from Jade's company LinkedIn. Turned out Amanda had been doing her own investigation since our bagel shop meeting and had figured out who Connor was. Brian sat there processing everything while his dad asked me if I knew whether the affair was still ongoing. I told him about Connor showing up at Jade's office and the harassment text she'd mentioned. Brian's face went red, and he pulled out his phone and called Jade right there in front of all of us. Jade answered, and Brian put her on speaker. He asked her where she was, and she said she was at home. He asked if she was alone, and she said yes. Why? He told her he was at his parents' house and needed to ask her something important. She already sounded nervous asking what it was. Brian asked her who Connor was. The silence on the phone was deafening. Then Jade said he was just someone from work. Brian asked why someone from work was texting her, asking to meet up and talk about their situation. More silence. Then, Jade started crying and saying she could explain everything if Brian would just come home so they could talk in person. Brian asked if she'd been having an affair. Jade said it was complicated, and she really needed to explain in person. Brian said that sounded like a yes, and Jade started crying harder and begging him to please not do this over the phone. Please just come home and let her explain. Brian hung up. His dad said they were going to start looking into annulment options since the marriage was less than a month old. His mom said they wanted their money back from the down payment on the house since it was given under false pretenses. Brian just sat there staring at nothing. I left after that because it wasn't my drama to watch anymore. I'd done what I needed to do. I drove home and checked my phone to find 23 new missed calls. Jade had called 19 times in the last hour. Mom called 3 times. Mitchell called once. This morning I woke up to 94 total missed calls from the last 24 hours alone. Jade's been calling every 15 minutes like clockwork. My parents have been calling in between her calls. Mitchell's been sending WhatsApp messages saying we need to have an emergency family meeting because everything is falling apart. I checked Jade's Instagram and she's made it private. Her company LinkedIn shows she's updated to looking for new opportunities, which means the office gossip probably made her current position untenable. Brian hasn't posted anything, but his relationship status is now blank instead of married. My foreclosure attorney called and said my parents' lawyer had contacted him trying to work out a settlement. The offer was they'd sign the house over to me completely and move out within 60 days if I'd forgive the back payments and let them avoid the foreclosure on their credit report. I told him to counter with they sign over the house, pay me back the $43,000 in payments I'd made, and they have 30 days to move out. He said he'd send over the paperwork. Mitchell sent me a message an hour ago saying Jade had a complete breakdown last night and is staying with our parents because Brian changed the locks on their house. He said I'd successfully destroyed my sister's marriage and our parents' financial security, and he hoped I was proud of myself. I am proud of myself, actually. For the first time in my entire life, I feel like I have the power in this family dynamic. They spent years making me feel worthless, and now they're all scrambling to deal with the consequences of underestimating me. Mom left a voicemail this morning that I actually listened to. She was begging me to please stop the foreclosure, saying they were too old to start over, saying she was sorry for anything they'd done to hurt me. It's the first time she's ever apologized for anything. Too little and way too late. Jade sent me a text from yet another new number saying Connor had reached out to Brian directly and told him everything about their affair, including details I didn't even know. Apparently, it had been going on for over a year, not just a few months like Jade claimed. She said Brian's family was pursuing legal action to get back all the money they'd invested in the marriage, and she was going to lose everything. I replied and told her she'd already lost everything when she decided to cheat on her fiancé and then humiliate her brother at her wedding. She responded saying I was cruel and vindictive and exactly the disappointment our parents always said I was. I blocked that number too. My current missed call count is 126 over the last 48 hours. The voicemails are piling up faster than I can delete them. Mitchell's threatening to show up at my office again. My parents are apparently looking at apartments because they know they're losing the house one way or another. Jade's marriage is over before it really started, and she's facing financial consequences from Brian's family that are probably going to destroy her for years. And me? I'm sitting in my paid-off condo that I bought with money I made from the career they mocked, watching everything I spent years planning finally come to fruition. They called me their biggest regret at that wedding. They called me a mistake and a parasite and a disappointment. Now I'm the one holding all the cards, and they're the ones desperately calling and begging and trying to fix what they broke. The family that spent my entire adult life making me feel like I wasn't good enough is now learning exactly what it costs to treat someone like that. So yeah, to answer the question everyone's been asking since my first post, was it worth it? Absolutely. Every single second of planning, every moment of sitting through their insults while I gathered evidence, every payment I made on that house loan while documenting everything, all worth it. To watch them finally understand that actions have consequences, and the disappointment they created isn't going to save them anymore.